You are a stakeholder in your own survival. If there is any kind of emergency at work, big or small, do you know what to do to save yourself and others? There are important practices you should know. Also, facility-specific guidance may be provided by your facility manager. Every facility or activity is responsible for identifying an emergency director, also known as a local emergency director, and to identify protective action wardens, also known as emergency action team members. Please take the time to become familiar with these people. Ensure that all visitors that you are responsible for are aware of the facility-specific emergency procedures. Also, be prepared to assist visitors or the physically challenged during an emergency. Know where the shelter-in-place areas, evacuation routes, and assembly areas are that apply to your work location. Maps are posted at entrances and exits as well as in high-traffic areas. You can also locate shelter-in-place and evacuation maps in the facility data warehouse through the links provided on the NNSS homepage. The Emergency Action Team members and local emergency director for your facility can also provide this information. In the event of an emergency, notify nearby workers. Let others know about the situation and, if possible, provide barriers to keep workers from entering the incident scene. You may yell or use the radio. For any type of facility evacuation, pull the fire alarm to notify others. Once in a safe location, call 911 and inform the Operations Command Center of the incident. Look at this chart and see who would be contacted if you call 911 from a landline or a mobile device. Note that if your 911 call does not connect to the Operations Command Center, then you must contact the Operations Command Center duty manager directly at 702-295-0311. Another method to contact the Operations Command Center is the Duress button on a radio at the NNSS. By pressing the Duress button, you will be automatically connected to the Operations Command Center fire dispatcher. To transmit to the fire dispatcher, the push-to-talk button must be pressed. For the purposes of this video, we will be referencing NNSS 911 calls from a landline. Once you've successfully called 911 and reached the NNSS Command Center fire dispatcher, tell them your name and your callback number and the nature of the emergency. Stay on the line and answer any questions they have.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, this is the LED in building 23600. There's a fire in the southwest corner of the building. I'm evacuating the building.
Copy, what's your callback number?
It's 702-295-5555.
Are there any injuries?
No, none at this time, none that I know of.
Is there any visible smoke or flames?
No, all I got is a report that there is very heavy smoke in the southwest corner of the building.
Okay, I copy. There's a fire in the southwest corner of the building, 23600, and you're evacuating the building. Give me a call back when everyone has evacuated and you have accountability.
Okay, will do.
Protective actions may be announced via a public address system, radio announcement, verbal instructions, flashing strobe lights, or other methods. The 4 protective actions are evacuate, shelter in place, self-barricade, and remain indoors. Let's discuss these protective actions. Evacuating is always the preferred protective action if it is safe to do so. In the following scenario, a local emergency director discovers a fire and gives the protective action to evacuate.
Okay.
Attention, attention, attention. This is the LED. There is a fire in the southwest corner of the building. All personnel
Emergency
evacuate.
action team members sweep their designated areas. Remember, if an emergency action team member feels it is unsafe to sweep an area, that's okay. Just remember to notify the LED of any areas not swept. During an evacuation, do not go back into the building to perform sweeps. Only sweep designated areas while exiting the building. If you hear an announcement or are told by an emergency action team member to evacuate, immediately secure classified information if it is safe to do so. Grab any keys, coats, and important items such as medicine and immediately go to your nearest emergency evacuation assembly area. As you leave, be sure to leave the lights on and keep your door open. Emergency action team members will close all doors as they sweep an area. Be aware of your surroundings. When evacuating, evacuate to your closest exit. Sometimes we fall into established routines. This route may be a longer path than an exit that is closer to your workstation. If your closest exit is blocked by a hazard such as heavy smoke or fire, do not exit that way. Turn around and evacuate through a different exit. Once all emergency action team members have swept the building, they place evacuation stickers across the exterior of each exit door and the door frame to inform any occupant not to enter the building. If an exterior door is marked with an evacuation sticker, do not enter the building. Once you've arrived at your designated evacuation assembly area, make yourself available for an emergency action team member to collect accountability. The local emergency director may ask everyone about the specific hazards that you may be aware of, such as chemical storage lockers and their contents, or a radiological source locker. The LED collects this information and marks it on their map.
Now we're going to update the map for accountability and hazards. EAT members, where did you perform your sweeps, or where have you not swept? Go ahead and mark it on the map.
Okay, this area over here, we swept. Over here, we swept. Over here, we swept. This area did not get swept.
Okay, so over here, I'm going to mark not swept. Supervisors, do you have accountability of all your personnel?
I'm missing 2.
Missing 2?
Mine are all here.
Okay, missing 2. All right, does anybody know of any hazards at the facility?
Yes, we have a grab locker
Okay, go ahead and mark it.
right here.
Okay.
The local emergency director will brief the arriving incident commander on whether everyone is accounted for, if there are missing or injured personnel, hazards in the building, and any areas not swept. The incident commander could include Fire and Rescue, Nye County Sheriff's Office, the Contractor Protective Force, or local responders from outside agencies. Once evacuated, the local emergency director will work with the incident commander to restrict access into the building. Personnel will not be permitted to enter the building to retrieve personal items or work-related items until the building has been surveyed for habitability by health physics and/or industrial hygiene. Shelter in place is a protective action to take when there is a potential airborne hazard. For example, a radiological or chemical spill could release hazardous materials in the air, and you must protect yourself from inhaling or ingesting these hazardous substances. In the following scenario, a local emergency director is informed of a chemical spill and will give the protective action to shelter in place at the facility.
Justin, some barrels fell off a truck outside and there's a yellow cloud.
Okay, go ahead and shelter in place. I'll make a PA announcement. Attention, attention, attention. This is the LED. A truck has spilled some chemicals outside. All personnel shelter in place. EAT members perform your sweeps.
Emergency action team members sweep their designated areas. Remember, if an emergency action team member feels it is unsafe to sweep an area, that's okay. Just remember to notify the LED of any areas not swept. If you hear an announcement or are told by an EAT member to shelter in place, immediately secure classified information if it is safe to do so. Grab any keys, coats, and important items such as medicine, and immediately go to the nearest shelter-in-place location. As you leave, be sure to leave the lights on and keep your door open. EAT members will close all doors as they sweep an area. Be sure to assist any visitors or any physically challenged personnel as you report to the shelter-in-place area. Once all emergency action team members have swept the building, they place shelter-in-place stickers across the interior of each exit door and the door frame to inform any occupant not to leave the building. If a door is marked with a shelter-in-place sticker, do not exit the building and report to a shelter-in-place location. Once you have arrived at your designated shelter-in-place area, make yourself available for an emergency action team member to collect accountability. A shelter-in-place area is defined by the facility manager. The local emergency director may designate any room as a shelter-in-place area based on their situational awareness to better assist with the emergency. If a person arrives at the shelter-in-place location after the initial assembly, emergency action team members interview that person and ask where they came from. Emergency action team members segregate the newly arrived worker in case they are contaminated. This prevents spreading contamination. When all workers have arrived at the shelter-in-place area, emergency action team members should attempt to secure ventilation and tape up doors and windows if materials are present. A wet towel or equivalent should be placed at the bottom of each door to prevent air from entering the room. The local emergency director reminds all personnel that no eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing is allowed to prevent accidental ingestion of the hazard that could be in the air. The local emergency director will brief the arriving incident commander on accountability, missing and injured personnel, hazards in the building, and any areas not swept. During an active shooter, active assailant scenario, you may or may not receive a protective action from the local emergency director to self-barricade. If you hear gunshots or hear a self-barricade protective action, you should immediately gain situational awareness of the emergency. If you know where the active assailant is and can evacuate away from the violence, then do so. Emergency action team members do not perform sweeps. The local emergency director and emergency action team members do not wear their vests. If you find yourself between the assailant and an exit, then initiate a self-barricade. Go into a room, lock the door, turn off the lights, and close any blinds. Block the door with anything you can find. Silence your cell phone. An active assailant is looking to do a lot of damage in a short time. If they believe that the room you are in is unoccupied, they will most likely move on to the next room. But if you find yourself in a situation where the assailant gains access to your location, you must act as aggressively and violently as possible towards the threat, to include physical violence. Yell, throw things, and improvise weapons. Perform any action to stop the threat and commit to your actions. Once law enforcement arrives, follow their instructions. Show your hands and do not ask them to help you. Law enforcement is there for a single purpose: to stop the threat. A remain indoors protective action is used when there may be an incident outside and the local emergency director needs all personnel to remain in the building. Examples of a remain indoors scenario could include a fire in a nearby building, a vehicle accident just outside your building, or a weather event. Unlike shelter in place, remain indoors means that workers stay inside the building but do not have to assemble in a designated shelter in place area. Emergency action team members do not perform sweeps unless directed to do so. The LAD and EAT members do not wear their vests or use checklists unless directed to do so. Emergency action team members should grab government keys in preparation for a possible evacuation order. The local emergency director will inform you when the remain indoors protective action has been lifted. When an actual incident, exercise, or drill is completed, all workers participate in a hot wash conducted to identify strengths and weaknesses of the event. It is not a play-by-play overview, but it should cover the major discussion points. The hot wash includes everyone and includes what went well, what did not go well, and any improvements that may need to occur by updating a procedure or the need for extra training. The idea of a hot wash is to be self-critical. It is important to document participation by having all involved personnel complete company-specific training rosters. It is important to note that you should receive credit only if you have participated in the event. Ensure that all appropriate training rosters are submitted to training. In this video, we covered the 4 protective actions of evacuate, shelter in place, self-barricade, and remain indoors. Local emergency directors and emergency action team members use checklists to assist them in performing their duties during an emergency. Every worker should know their responsibilities, area-specific emergency procedures, and their shelter-in-place and evacuation locations. If you have any questions about emergency procedures or anything in this video, you may contact your facility manager, a local emergency director, or any emergency action team member for more information. Company directives may be referenced for more information as well. The Facility Data Warehouse contains all evacuation maps and shelter-in-place maps for each building. Also listed are methods to obtain emergency management notifications and instructions during off hours. Remember, it is the responsibility of each employee to know what to do in the event of an emergency. You are a stakeholder in your own survival.